Davey.
Thank you very much. Look, this is legislation that has been far too long in the making, given the urgency it should have received. This legislation is in response to the Royal Commission into Defence and Veteran Suicide first recommendation in its interim report, which was handed down in August 2022. The recommendation found that the veteran compensation and rehabilitation legislative system is so complicated that it actually adversely affects the mental health of some veterans, both serving and ex-serving ADF members, and can contribute to suicidality. Those words, "can contribute to suicidality," should have raised a sense of urgency, and particularly on an issue that essentially has bipartisan support. So work on simplifying and harmonising the system should have been a priority, even as the Royal Commission completed its vital and sensitive investigations. Yet it took almost 2 years for the bill to first be introduced, passing the House of Representatives on the 6th of November last year, after debate originally opened in August. And since then, it has languished on the Senate's notice paper. It was first put on the paper on the 18th of November, and it has been on a veritable roller coaster, being pulled up the notice paper, pushed back the notice paper, up and down, which shows you the level of priority this government has put on securing the health and well-being of our veteran personnel. And we must ask, how many more will be let down and feel abandoned before the changes of this bill finally come about, given they will not come into effect until July 2026, nearly 4 years after the original recommendation was made. We currently have about 300,000 veterans in Australia. We currently have about 57,000 serving personnel. So we have a great many reasons why we need to get this legislation correct, to get it passed and to get it working. The Royal Commission reported that 1,677 veteran suicides had occurred between 1997 and 2021. But it is widely recognised that this figure is probably very shy of the more accurate assessment of upwards of about 3,000. The very, very sad reality is that there is more chance of a veteran dying from suicide than dying while serving our country, and that is tragic. So this legislation combines the 3 separate acts that currently exist for entitlements, compensation and rehabilitation support for veterans into one. The 3 acts being Military Rehabilitation and Compensation Act, commonly known as the MRCA, the Defence-Related Claims Act, or the DRCA, and the Veterans Entitlements Act. They will be combined into an amended Military Rehabilitation and Compensation Act, or, as my colleague in the other place, Shadow Minister for Veterans Affairs, Barnaby Joyce, calls it, the MRCA 2.0. Currently, the 3 acts are over 2,000 pages long and contain 850 legislative instruments and provide different types of compensation, including pensions, lump sums, periodic compensation payments, healthcare cards, rehabilitation. In some cases, veterans have claims under all 3 acts. It is no wonder that our veteran community finds it overly complicated to try and wade through the system. But I want to make this point. It is very important for our veterans community to understand that in streamlining these 3 acts into one, no one who is currently receiving a payment under any of those 3 acts will be worse off. This is an assurance that has been given to us by the government, and it is an assurance we will hold the government to. In some instances, allowances will increase, such as increased funeral allowances, reimbursement of funeral costs, and other service-related deaths. There might be higher reimbursements for travel, for treatment and consolidation of household and attendant care, among other enhancements. And this is all welcome. And while this bill simplifies the veterans' compensation arrangements, the systems remain complex, with veterans and their families eligible for support still under multiple acts. This needs very careful management by Veterans Affairs. And it also requires ongoing consideration and review. And that is why we will be moving a second reading amendment calling for the government to also review the statement of principles and the role of the repatriation medical officers, not to try and slow things down, but to make sure that the statement of principles are fit for purpose, that no one is slipping through the cracks because the statement of principles is being applied too rigidly, and to look at ways to ensure that the RMAs can do their job without hindrance. We also find that despite this complexity and despite the time and the consideration that has gone into drafting this bill to streamline and harmonise compensation for veterans, we also have an 11th hour amendment put forward by the government to establish a new Veterans Commissioner. This is also a recommendation of the Royal Commission. So the intent, the principle of establishing a commissioner is not to be objected to. However, this amendment is being rushed through with a lack of consultation with the very people who have been part of this process all the way along. The very people who participated in the recent Senate inquiry into this bill. This amendment was not part of that inquiry. And those people only read about it last week and have raised quite significant concerns with the way this was drafted. But also the question needs to be raised, why does this amendment have to be rushed through today when the Commission was already in the pipeline? On the 17th of January, Mr Michael Manthorpe was appointed as interim Commissioner to allow and to deliver the establishment of a legislative body by September. This amendment's being rushed through to establish a body by September, but without allowing consultation and scrutiny. And that is the concern that has been raised with us. The families of Veterans Guild have written to us specifically requesting the amendment be withdrawn because they say the amendment is a surprise to many within the veteran community who, despite receiving multiple communications about the Vets Bill and a media release about the appointment of the interim Commissioner, those stakeholders were not advised about this significant amendment. And they fundamentally disagree with rushing this unconsulted amendment through Parliament, and they point out that it could have significant consequences for the system and communities within it. The key issues they raise are the lack of transparency and consultation, that there's only 2 public reports on the status of the implementation of the Royal Commission required by this amendment, and they would like to see further reports. So, while we're not opposing this amendment, we are proposing to put through an amendment of our own requiring that the Commission be reviewed. Effectively, what should have happened is we would have had this amendment at the time of the Senate inquiry, or we'd have this amendment as a standalone bill and we could have sent it to a Senate inquiry and had a review to ensure it's fit for purpose, to ensure that people can be consulted and to ensure that the design of the Commission is fit for purpose. We're now having to do that back to front, because the last thing we want to see is the streamlining and harmonisation of the compensation program to be held up in disputes. So we will pass the substantive bill. We will accept the amendment, but we hope that our subsequent amendment calling for a review will also gain support, because this is a very sensitive and a very complex area. And most Defence Force personnel, they enlist, they serve their time, and most of them transition back to civilian life okay. Most of them go on to make an enormous contribution to civilian life, and a hell of a lot of them work in voluntary services. And I thank them for that, for their continued service to our nation. I want to take this opportunity to mention and thank Disaster Relief Australia, who are an organisation established by veterans and manned for veterans and veteran volunteers. They step up post-disaster. They provide management and logistic support to communities that have been impacted by natural disasters, and I am sure they are up in far north Queensland as we speak, assisting in the recovery and clean-up efforts. And that is an organisation that plays an important role in supporting our veteran community, connecting our veteran members with business holders, with other veterans, and giving them that support network. Because we know through the work of the Royal Commission that those connections to assist veterans, and similarly we've seen the benefits of things like Veterans Wellbeing Centres, those initiatives and organisations like DRA that provide a hub for connection and support can really help veterans post their full-time service. So we will be supporting this bill. As I said at the outset, it's been a long time coming, but it is the right thing to do to streamline it, and I really hope that we continue to watch and monitor and hold the DVA to account. I'm sure they're preparing for the next estimates diligently. But let's hope that we can make our veterans' lives a little bit easier by passing this bill.